Welcome and good afternoon, everyone. How are you guys doing so far? Doing good? Cool. So it's really my honor to be here and to present NSX for small data centers breaking boundaries. So first of all, I would like to thank all my colleagues and my customers who have helped me create this content, and especially my newborn son, who is exactly 1 month old right now. It's just because of him and the sleepless night, he kept me awake so that I can work on this presentation and bring it to you. So with that, let me directly jump into the presentation. So in this presentation, we will be discussing about small data centers. But before that, I want to show you that NSX is growing in momentum. NSX is being deployed not only in very large scale data centers, but also in medium and small data centers. And my role, since I'm part of the NSX product management team, is to help customers deploy NSX in their data centers successfully. So I go out in the field, I talk to customers, and I help them deploy those NSX solutions and features for them. There are many use cases that are being deployed with NSX, but I want to focus mainly on 3 pillars. So the security, automation, and application continuity. Security is the most successfully deployed and most widely deployed use case, I would say. And then we have automation. You can automate all the processes, all the virtual machine creation or network creation through our automation tool, which is provided by NSX APIs or our products like vRealize Automation. And then in application continuity space, we also provide you solutions like disaster recovery or disaster avoidance with NSX. This is the standard disclaimer. You guys have seen it. I'm not building any rocket ship here. It is not the Star Trek Enterprise session, so this is not anything future-looking is not presented here. This is all available to you, publicly available to you information. So nothing forward-looking here. Okay, so let me tell you a story. About 10 months ago, I was visiting a customer, and this customer is a transit customer, a very large transportation customer in California. So they have purchased a hyper-converged solution, and they were trying to deploy NSX on it. Now, these hyper-converged solutions are very expensive, and he purchased 8-node cluster. So now there are 8 nodes in it, and he read our design guide or reference guide, NSX reference guide, which I have the URL for here. And he was in this dilemma. He was puzzled that, okay, how can I create these clusters like management edge and compute cluster with 8 nodes? I want to deploy NSX, but my hyper-converged system is also restricting me to create those clusters. I don't have budget to add more to it, so how can I do that? So I help him deploy this in his small data center. And when I say small data center, it does not mean a small customer or a small enterprise. It could be a very large enterprise with small siloed VC deployments within it, and you can actually use those VC siloed deployment to put your NSX on, right? So that's the one thing I want to highlight. So I helped them, and then he gave me the idea that why don't you present it to rest of the folks, because there are many customers who would like to deploy NSX in a small DC situation with less number of hosts. So what can they do? How can they deploy it? So that's the idea I took. And then now we're going to break these cluster boundaries, and we are going to deploy NSX in one single cluster with limited number of hosts. Okay, so I was thinking about the agenda, and I said, let me start off with the introduction of NSX, an NSX component, and give you an idea of what it takes to build a very large data center. What is our reference design? And then I'm going to guide you into a small data center, and then will help you implement NSX in the small data center by showing all the various components and the features and the highly available nature of this product that can actually you can use to successfully deploy your NSX implementation. And towards the end, I have plans to show you the growth option, because when it comes to NSX, it's highly flexible and modular product. Okay, so when you deploy with one use case, it does not mean that you are restricted to that one particular use case. You can easily grow into other dimensions because it's all in software. And it's not like it's only for one vertical. It could be for any vertical. It's not like only healthcare can utilize a small data center. No, you can actually implement it in many different ways. You can start from anywhere, and you can go anywhere. That's the idea. I would like to take questions at the end, so I would like you appreciate if you can hold on to those questions towards the end. Okay, so with that, let me show you the high-level components or the architecture of NSX. So how many of you are already familiar with NSX or have played with NSX a bit? Okay, so the majority of the folks in the room already know a little bit about NSX, or maybe they have deployed NSX. So I'm going to be quick on this slide. It's going to be used as a refresher. So when you look at the NSX architecture, in the top layer, you have NSX Manager, right? So that is the single virtual machine, the OVA that you download from VMware and implement it as a VM on your hypervisor, right? Or your vCenter deployment. So that's the management piece. Then after that, we have the control plane. So what we did, we separated the data plane and the control plane. And the control plane is driven by NSX controller cluster. So you have 3 controllers in this control plane. You can also see the DLR control VM, which is used only if you are using dynamic routing protocols like OSPF or BGP within your virtual environment. Then in the data plane space, you have ESXi hypervisor. So this hypervisor is like the line card in a modular chassis, right? So this is where you are forwarding the data in and out. Now, within that data plane, we have provided some functions that are distributed in nature. So they are spread across. So the high availability and the resiliency is already built into these components. So what are these? So you have VXLAN, logical switch. You have router, distributed router, DLR as we call it, and distributed firewall. These are the distributed functions part of your ESXi hypervisor. And then the bottom layer is the data plane layer, but this is provided by a VM, the Edge VM, or as we call it, Edge Services Gateway, ESG. Now, this is like a multi-function gateway, a virtual machine form factor. You can enable one feature or multiple features on it. For example, you can enable Edge firewall, load balancer, routing, and this can be used as an off-ramp, on-ramp between your physical world and your virtual world. So that's what we have as component. So everyone is clear on it? Okay, move forward. Okay. Now this is a reference architecture for a very large scale data center. Now, why do we ask you to create multiple clusters? Basically, the idea is that you want to put resources or compute resources based on the nature of work they are performing. So we asked you to create the management cluster, so you can put the management virtual machines, vCenter, NSX Manager, Log Insight, or any other virtual machine in the management cluster, because the requirements and characteristics are different for those virtual machines. In the edge space, since it is talking to your WAN and internet edge, you are pumping high amount of bandwidth or traffic in and out, so we want you to put the ESXi resources based on those requirements. And then compute is variable in nature. The I/O requirements, CPU requirements are varied based on the workload that you're running. If you're running Oracle, it will require something else, SharePoint, Exchange. So you can have one single compute cluster, or you would have multiple. In a large DC, you will always have multiple clusters. At least this is what I have seen. Now, okay, it's all good. We have a large DC, 3 cluster. What about a medium-sized customer who does not have that many number of hosts? Maybe hosts between 10 to 100, and not a very high bandwidth requirement. So what is the choice? What are the choices? Okay, so now what you can do, you can collapse your management and edge together into one single cluster. And now you have your compute cluster, and this is where you're going to deploy your virtual machine. So that's another design which is possible. Now let's come to the small DC. Now a small DC, like I said in the beginning, this customer was facing this dilemma or the challenge. How can he deploy it? So this is where the small DC design guide comes into picture, or the design options comes into picture. Now what we're going to do, we're going to break this boundary of cluster, and we're going to put each and every component in one single cluster. Okay? So now, since you're putting all your eggs in one basket, you have to be careful, right? Because you had multiple clusters with the previous design. Here it is just one cluster, so you have to be a little careful. So your resource reservation will play a key part when it comes to deploying NSX in a small DC. Okay, so now let's jump directly into the deployment options. So there are number of different deployment models possible that you can leverage to deploy NSX. I'm going to show you the most important one. So the most important one are distributed firewall only model, or as we call it, security focus model, and the second is the full stack model. So in the security focused deployment model, you can implement NSX without disturbing anything in your data center. So if you already have a data center built with vCenter, your VLAN backed port group, all you need to do is just drop this NSX Manager virtual machine, and it will allow or actually implement this firewall next to the virtual machine. And that is the beauty of this architecture, that any traffic leaving this virtual machine or entering this virtual machine is now inspected by firewall. And that's how you're going to achieve micro-segmentation. So that's the beauty of this architecture, non-disruptive, very easy to implement, very small footprint. How about full stack? So full stack is where you're going to get the full advantage of NSX. You will get the VXLAN, distributed routing, optimized switching. You will be abstracted from the physical limitations of your hardware. So you can have anything at the hardware layer, could be any vendor's software. And then you're going to put everything as a software layer on top of it in overlay, VXLAN-based overlay model. So that's the high-level overview of the deployment option. Now, this model is a centralized edge deployment model, which is not very popular these days. So this is only for the customers who are not fully ready to embrace full stack model. So they started their journey with the distributed firewall, VLAN backed port group, but for some reason they cannot make changes on their MTU, on the physical side, on the routing side. But they need some edge functionality, the routing, maybe the load balancer is a very common use case. So what they can do for the transition or for in between, as an intermediate step, they can use this edge-only deployment model before they fully go to the full stack model. My personal recommendation is that if you are starting this network virtualization journey, then go all the way to full stack. That's my recommendation, but this is also available as one of the options. Again, this is a very simple deployment. You're not adding any controller. You're not adding any VXLAN. You're not making any changes on your, your physical side, MTUs or whatnot. Okay, so now we're going to focus only on security-focused deployment model and full stack model. So this is what I'm going to show you here. I'm not going to touch on the edge-only model now. Okay, so in security-focused model, it's extremely simple and easy to implement. All you need is a virtual machine, NSX Manager. You prepare your cluster, and that's it. Now you are ready to deploy or implement the firewall rules. The NSX Manager will prepare the cluster. So now in this case, since it's just one cluster, all the hosts are now prepared for NSX, right? So everyone will get distributed firewall. All the hosts will get the distributed firewall. You can use existing VLAN backed port group, or you can deploy VXLAN. Nobody is stopping you, but this is just could be a starting point to go with the VLAN backed port group option. Within the security deployment model or the distributed firewall-based deployment model, you can easily achieve micro-segmentation with that, right? So look at this diagram on your right-hand side. All you need is 3 hosts in order to deploy this, right? You only need NSX Manager and vCenter, and it will give you the micro-segmentation and distributed firewall. It is how simple it is. And look at the NSX footprint. You only need 2 virtual machines for that. So the footprint is extremely, extremely small. But for the production deployment, I highly recommend my customers to go with at least 3 ESXi hosts. Why? Because if you want to grow from distributed firewall to full stack model with VXLAN and controllers and everything, then it's a lot easier for you to utilize existing cluster and implement the full stack. Okay. Now within the security-focused deployment model, what you can do with distributed firewall, you can add more services. You can add services like guest introspection or agentless antivirus service. So agentless antivirus is another feature that we provide as part of NSX with the help of our partner like Trend or McAfee, which allows your agent, scanning agent, to be part of the hypervisor. So we take this agent away from your virtual machine and we put it in the hypervisor. So now your security is being controlled by the hypervisor. Your virtual machine, your guest VMs, maybe VDI virtual machines are now lightweight because the scanning, antivirus scanning is performed by the hypervisor and the service VM. Okay, so that's what you can also achieve with this model without making any changes on your physical infrastructure. Again, the footprint is very small. The only addition you will see is here are 2 extra virtual machines. One is the native guest introspection SVM or service VM, and the second is the partner SVM. These are not very heavy-duty virtual machines, again, lightweight. So your footprint will be small, so you don't need to worry about it. The only important caveat here is that once you deploy these service VMs are now going to tie with the ESXi host. So you should not vMotion or storage vMotion those virtual machines. That's the important thing you need to remember for this design or for this implementation. Okay, so I am actually presenting a deep dive on this topic tomorrow, how to implement agentless antivirus and IPS IDS solution with NSX technologies tomorrow 10 a.m. So if you're interested, you're more than welcome to join me. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about full stack. So we looked at the security-based deployment model, but what about the full stack? Now in the full stack, like I said before, you're getting the full benefit of NSX. You're getting the VXLAN-based overlay. You're getting the routing. Now your traffic does not need to go all the way to a physical device, a routing device or some SUI, and then get the routing done over there. Now your ESXi host becomes a router. The routing decisions are made right at the source, close to the workload. So if 2 virtual machines, they need to talk to each other on 2 different subnets, your ESXi will automatically route them. You will not be going to the physical gateway or something else. Okay. So with that model, now you need to prepare your cluster, which is a requirement, of course. Now you're going to be deploying controllers, NSX controllers, because those NSX controllers are responsible for providing VXLAN and distributed routing. So now you will need 3 controllers in this deployment. And I think the most important point is here. Now you need to increase the MTU size, okay? Because VXLAN implementation or specification requires you to increase the MTU size because now you are encapsulating the traffic and you are basically sending a larger packet onto the pipe, right? So this is what you need to do on your physical infrastructure side, just for the VXLAN or VTAP segment. Not for everything. If you want to do it for every VLAN, that's perfectly fine. But at least for the VXLAN VTAP segment that you have, that should be increased to 1600 MTU or more. Okay. Okay, so we looked at the major design considerations for this full stack model, but how about the implementation? Again, since it's a small data center, you're deploying everything in one single cluster here. You can see the footprint is very small. It's extremely small. Only 7 virtual machines is what you need if you're deploying the full stack without the routing, without the dynamic routing. If you add dynamic routing into the mix, then you need DLR control VM that I talked about, right? So then you will be talking about 9 virtual machines. But again, it's a small footprint. Those DLR control VMs are compact in size and not very bulky, not very heavy virtual machines. Okay. So our recommendation is to at least go with 4 hosts, although you can actually have everything within 3 hosts, because now you see these controllers, NSX controllers, they should be residing on their host. You should not be putting 2 hosts or 2 controllers on one single host. So that is what we recommend. Okay. So we talked about the deployment model, security-focused deployment model, full-stack model, but how about the individual component? What are the options or capabilities we are providing you that will allow you to deploy it successfully in your small data center? So that's what we're going to see here. Okay. So the foundation for NSX is vCenter. So this is what you need to have. And when it comes to vCenter, you can deploy vCenter in different form factors. So you have tiny, you have a small, you have medium and large. For the small data center, tiny and small are okay. You can actually use them. There is no harm. How many of you are actually using the small deployment here in production? Yeah, I mean, it's a good number, right? So yeah, so you are perfectly fine. If you're using a small in your production deployment, you're perfectly fine. You can actually deploy NSX on top of it. I would recommend small. Why? Because you will get extra headroom, because tiny will only give you 10 hosts. So that's my recommendation. And the performance between tiny and small there is not a big difference between the performance of these two models. So you can, I have a link there which actually compares the performance between different deployment options. So you can go take a look after. Licensing consideration. Again, this is a reference slide. But the point I wanted to make here is that NSX is supported on any vSphere licensing scheme. So no matter you have Essential Plus, you have Standard Enterprise or Enterprise Plus, it doesn't matter to us. We're going to support it for you. And the best part is that the VDS, which is the most important requirement for NSX deployment, comes free when you purchase NSX license. So if you're using Standard, for example, in your case, you can deploy it, VDS comes free, and that's perfectly fine as long as you're running vSphere 5.5, Update 3, or 6 Plus. For NSX, we have created different tiers in terms of licensing. So you have the standard tier, which will give you routing and switching. The advanced will give you routing, switching, and security. And enterprise will give you everything, including the cross vCenter NSX option. Right? So majority of my customers in a small DC, they are using the advanced option. So that's perfectly fine if you're not going for the DR type use case. If you don't have multiple data centers that you want to link together with NSX, advanced is perfectly fine for you. Okay, so what about vCenter design itself? So vCenter could be deployed with embedded PSC or with external PSC, the platform services controller, right? So for small data centers, we have tested with embedded PSC, and it's okay. It's perfectly fine. There are no issues with that. But my recommendation is that if you're planning to grow your NSX deployment, maybe you are thinking about linking other vCenters to your deployment, then think about putting external PSC. That will be easy for you in future. But if your data center is very static, you're not growing, then vCenter with embedded PSC is perfectly fine. This is, I would say, the most important implementation detail that you need to know. Since you are deploying everything in one cluster, everything is prepared with NSX, distributed firewall is everywhere. So now when you're writing a distributed firewall rule, you need to make sure you're not blocking yourself logging into vCenter, right? So what you can do, you can use NSX VM exclusion list and put your vCenter log inside or any other management VM in this list. So once you put VM in this list, it will not get the firewall rule regardless, right? So either you do that, use VM exclusion list, or you write some fine-grained distributed firewall rules so that you're not blocking yourself logging into vCenter or other management devices. Okay? So NSX components, what about NSX component? They automatically become part of the exclusion list. You won't even see them in the list, so they're automatically added to it. So that's the thing that we did for you automatically. But what about NSX Manager? How can I protect and make sure my NSX Manager is running fine, right? So first of all, what we did, we actually are reserving 16 GB of memory by default when you deploy NSX virtual machine. So that reservation is already there. We need it. It's like a food and water for the virtual machine. Don't change it, although you can change it. It allows you to change it, but my recommendation is don't change these settings, because that's what we are using in our testing environment to test it. Okay. Backups. Backups are extremely important, not only for large or medium data center, but also for a small data center. Because you can take the snapshot or the backup of this NSX manager, and if something goes wrong, you can actually go back in time, and you can recover easily. No problem at all. So that's extremely important. Backups are extremely important. Controllers. So controllers are deployed through NSX manager, right? So, I mean, the implementation is just click, 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 right? So when you put this NSX virtual machine there, everything is bundled with it, the controller, DLR, control, VM, right? So you can log into NSX manager and deploy the controllers. So when you deploy controller, the recommended number is 3, right? So you cannot increase the number or decrease the number. So we want you to deploy 3 controllers in your environment. And what you should do, you should create anti-affinity rules so that you are putting these controllers on separate hosts. And you should be using the should rule. Don't use the must rule. Why? Because imagine a situation, you have 3 ESXi hosts, you put 3 controllers on them, and you use must rule. So must rule means that this virtual machine can only run on that particular ESXi host. Right? So if that host goes down, the controller VM will not power on to another ESXi host. Right? So that's our recommendation, to go with the should rule when you create anti-affinity rules. So the best part is, or the advantage is, or the implementation detail here is that these controllers are not in the data path. So even if they go down, your network will continue to function, similar to NSX manager. If NSX manager goes down, nothing will happen. Your network is perfectly fine. It will keep running. Okay, so how about the DLR control VM? What are the design considerations for DLR control VM? So like I said before, this DLR control VM is only needed when you are using dynamic routing protocol in your virtual environment. Right? So when you deploy a DLR control VM, you must and should deploy them in HA fashion. So you deploy 2 DLR control VM. One will be active, secondary will be standby. And in this case, we will automatically create anti-affinity rule for you. So you can see this is system-defined anti-affinity rule, and that will make sure that these 2 virtual machines are never sitting on one single host. Okay? And another thing, or the enhancement that we did, is that now when you deploy them, you can actually see directly from the UI which one is active, which one is standby. It really helps you, troubleshoot in case you run into some problems. Okay, ESG. So Edge Services Gateway, like I said, is in the data plane. It's a VM, virtual machine. It's a virtual machine form factor. You can deploy ESG either in HA mode, like active standby, or ECMP mode, equal cost multipath mode. So now this is where you need to make some design choices. Do you want stateful services like load balancer, NAT, or VPN type services with your ESG? If the answer is yes, then you should deploy ESG in HA mode. Because once you deploy ESG in ECMP mode, you will lose those stateful services. Okay, so that's the design choice you need to make. And after that, you need to ask yourself, okay, do I need throughput which is more than 10 gig? In a small data center, I have not seen a customer who would require more than 10 G. Right? So typically, customer would use ESG in HA mode, and they will have less than 10 G throughput, so they will deploy ESG in HA mode, basically. If you don't need stateful services, then you need to ask this question again: do I need more throughput, more than 10 G? If not, then ESG HA might be the easy option, because ESG HA, is easy in terms of implementation and troubleshooting as well, because your flows are deterministic. You know exactly which active virtual machine is there, which is pumping the traffic in and out. You can easily troubleshoot it. But nobody is actually stopping you to go with ECMP model. If you want to go with ECMP model because you are planning to grow in future, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. You can easily implement that in a multi-tiered fashion. That's okay with that. Okay. So this is what we see majority of the time. This is what our customers are using. ESG in HA mode with stateful services so that they can get the benefit of not only the distributed routing, logical switching, but also the edge services functionalities like VPN or edge firewall, load balancer, or NAT type functionalities. Okay, so what about the ESG implementation? So ESG is a virtual machine, right? And it's a VM form factor, and it comes into different flavors. So the large form factor is good enough for a majority of the deployments. And that is what I would recommend, especially for a small data center. Since you are resource constrained, you don't have so many number of hosts, then I would recommend you to go with the large option. Unless you want to use this Edge Services Gateway or ESG for L7 load balancing purposes. In that scenario, our recommendation is to use extra large for ESG deployment. Okay? So when we deploy these ESG virtual machines, we're going to enable reservation automatically for you, because this is what we believe that these virtual machines, they need some reservation so that they can function properly and your implementation or deployment is secure and successful. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at ESG when it is deployed in HA mode. So how you want to make sure that this ESG HA deployment is successful. So first thing you need to remember is just one basic rule. And the rule is that never put two active VMs on one single host. Never put active VM on one single host. And that's the rule we are following here. So if you look at the example here, this is what I recommend my customers to do. You have two hosts, so put active ESG and standby DLR control VM on host number 1. And on the second host, you can put standby ESG and active DLR control VM. So in case one host goes down, both active VMs are not down at the same time. Okay? So that's fundamentally the idea. And when we create these ESGs in HA mode, we will automatically create these anti-affinity rules for you, right? So that these VMs are not sitting on one single host. The only caveat with anti-affinity is that it comes with Enterprise or Enterprise Plus license. With the standard license, you will not get the DRS. Since you're not getting the DRS, you will not get the resource pool or anti-affinity rule creation. So that's why you need to manually make sure that these virtual machines are sitting on different hosts if you're not using Enterprise or Enterprise Plus vSphere license. Okay, so we saw the ESG in HA mode, but what about if you deploy ESG in ECMP mode, equal cost multipath mode? So in ESG, in ECMP mode, all the virtual machines are now active because they're actively participating in pumping traffic in and out, right? So our recommendation is, it's a common sense design, right? Why would you put active, like I said before, active VMs should not be sitting on one single host. So this ECMP virtual machine or ESGs are now, should be on a separate host. So you can see in this example, this customer has 4 hosts in a small data center. Host number 1 and 2, they are running as services gateway in ECMP mode, and the remaining hosts are running active and standby DLR control VM. Okay. Okay, so how about VDS? So this is another important question that my customer asks me all the time, and this is relevant to full stack deployment because now we are talking about the VXLAN VTAP creation in this example. So when it comes to enabling VXLAN in your NSX environment, at one stage it's going to ask you to provide the NIC teaming policy option, right? So our recommendation is to go with load based on source ID. That's what we recommend. So when you enable this option, you will be creating 2 VTAP VMK NICs in ESXi hosts, and that will be used for VXLAN encapsulation and decapsulation. But the advantage with this mode is that now you're providing multiple paths for your VXLAN traffic to go out. That's the advantage. But some customers, they don't like the idea of having 2 VMK NICs and 2 VTAPs created in ESXi host. So they can always go with the failover option. So the failover option means that one NIC is active, second is a standby. and that will create only one VTAP or VMK NIC. So that, for some customer, very small customer, and they don't have the staffing resources and the expertise available, so they would go with the failover option because it's easy when it comes to troubleshooting problems with this. Okay. All right, so now we have talked about the basic NSX architecture. We looked at the components. We looked at the deployment models, the security-focused deployment model, the full-stack model, which will give you the VXLAN and distributed routing. Then we looked at all the individual components and what features and functionalities and options we are providing that are built into the product that will make sure that your deployments are successful. Some of those features are coming from vSphere side, VDS side. Some of them are provided by NSX. For example, we create the cluster for you, the controller cluster, right? So we provide high availability with that. Some of the features are distributed in nature, like distributed firewall, distributed routing, logical switching. So they are actually spread across anyways. So that's how we are actually building this resiliency into the architecture. That is to make sure that you guys are comfortable when you deploy it in your small data center. Okay. So what about growing beyond NSX, small DC implementation? Okay, so you picked up one use case, you deployed your implementation using, let's say, distributed firewall, but what about growing beyond distributed firewall? How can you go from distributed firewall to full stack model? So, this is again a story I wanted to tell you. I was talking to this customer. He's a very large manufacturing customer. It's not a small enterprise, it's a very large enterprise. But they wanted to start small with their NSX implementation because they wanted to understand NSX. They wanted to get their head around this technology because it's a new technology for them. And then they wanted to create their own processes around this new model, because now you're taking this journey, you're moving from your physical environment to the virtual environment, and you're going towards software-defined data center or maybe the cloud path that you are taking. So this customer wanted to start very small. And then in the beginning, he asked me, like, okay, if I start small, can I grow in future? And the answer is absolutely. But for this customer, the unique thing is that he was looking to grow in multiple directions. And that is the use case I had in my mind, and that's what I took here, and I'm going to show it to you. So the first thing that he wanted me to tell him that, okay, if I deploy NSX in my small data center with few number of hosts, can I grow in terms of compute? If I add more compute, what's going to happen? Is it disruptive, or what should I do? So the answer is very simple. If you're adding more hosts, you can actually create another cluster, a compute cluster, and the existing cluster you have will contain your edge and management VMs. Okay? And that's how you can easily grow. And you can keep adding those clusters as you go. So that's one way of growing it. But that is not the only way to grow, right? So some customers would like to grow in terms of throughput. Right, so I met with a customer. He wanted to start small. He is actually using some video streaming services. So he's streaming a lot of traffic through this, through the virtual machines. And he said, what about if I want to grow, if I want to add more capacity? So, the answer is very simple. You can go with ECMP option, right? And you can increase the throughput very easily by implementing more because it's a scale-out architecture. You keep adding more ESGs in ECMP mode, and then you can actually provide more bandwidth as you go. Right? What about if you want to add more sites to your implementation? And that's a very common use case when it's come to DR, disaster recovery. How many of you are actually using NSX or DR story with SRM? How many of you have actually deployed SRM? A good number of people actually, yeah. So DR is essential. Every customer should have a DR story. It could be a tape backup that they're using today for their DR story, but that is essential. And actually, NSX will help you in that direction as well, because you can implement NSX with SRM, which is tightly integrated, and that will allow you to extend your logical networks or L2 segments across multiple data centers with universal logical switch and with universal logical router. So that's another direction you can take to grow into. And then definitely there are migration use cases to grow. One customer I know, he's in San Jose. His data center is in San Jose. He's planning to grow his data center, but the space is so expensive. He bought some space here in Las Vegas, and now he's thinking of migrating. And this is his growth plan. Like, okay, this is how I will grow. So again, we are helping them, this customer, to basically move everything and then put it here in the Las Vegas without disruption. It's all live with the live vMotion and everything. So these are the great success stories that customers have used and is still using with a small data center, large data center, with NSX in general. So now I want to show you some examples that will help you understand how you can actually grow your small DC deployment. So if you look at this architecture, this is a customer I work with. This is a casino customer in California, very small casino customer. They have about 200 slot machines, which are powered through the VDI. So the slot machines that you see here also in the casinos, in the back end you have a thin client and a virtual machine running, which is displaying all the options and everything. The slide, the card swipe machine on the side is also there, which is also integrated with their IP network. So you're swiping the credit card, the transaction has to be secure. So they are using NSX for all these purposes. So we actually implemented this architecture for him because he has a data center which is in rack. It's only 6 ESXi hosts. Very powerful, but only 6 ESXi hosts. And he did not want to change anything on the MTU side, on the physical side. So he said, you know what, I have a compliance coming. I need to pass this audit, just help me. So we said, okay, just drop NSX Manager VM in, and then start creating your firewall rules. And this is exactly what he did. And he didn't change anything on his physical side. So you can see he's still using the VLAN backport group. These virtual machines are connected to this distributed firewall. All the traffic leaving, from this virtual machine or entering into this virtual machine is now inspected by these firewall rules, and that's how he secured his infrastructure. But once he saw this use case, he said, you know what, I want to use more services. I want to use antivirus, agentless AV solution that you guys have, so that I can offload this virus scanning from my virtual machines, because now my virtual machines are bulky. They are keeping me slow. So we said, that's not a problem. You can easily drop these service VMs, the guest introspection SVM and the partner SVM, and now you have the agentless AV solution, right? So he extended from distributed firewall to agentless AV, and now we are actually working with him to actually grow it even further and go full stack, because he is now realizing the benefit of NSX. He's saying, you know what, why am I sending all the traffic to my physical gateway? Why can't I do the east-west routing? Why can't I optimize this? And I said, that's not it's not a brainer, right? It's so easy. So now we are in the process of deploying the DLR. We're going to put the edges. We're going to, of course, change the MTU on the physical side. And now these VLAN backport group are VXLAN backport group. So that's what we are doing for this customer. So that's the second customer story I wanted to tell you. This customer started with full stack, right? So previous customer started with distributed firewall. This customer started with full stack, distributed routing, DLR, edge services gateway for routing and firewall functionality. And he said, you know what? Now I want to grow and I want to add distributed firewall as a feature. So distributed firewall or load balancer, those features are extremely simple, right? So since he already deployed full stack, he already had distributed firewall, if you look at it. He was not using it because he didn't create any security groups or security policies, but he already had the feature baked into the product. So we helped him write some rules, and now he's actually utilizing them. Right, so that's the use case. One more addition I wanted to tell you here is that there are some customers who want to embrace this network virtualization journey, but they cannot do a quick cutover from their VLAN backport group to VXLAN backport group. So if you are in that situation, if your customer is in that situation, you can actually leverage NSX bridging functionality, L2 bridging functionality, that will allow you to have few virtual machines or a subset of virtual machines here on the VLAN back port group side, while you are migrating these virtual machines behind VXLAN back port group. That's another possibility. So that's another way of growing or migrating your virtual machines. And these use cases are all relevant for small DC, medium data center, or even for large data centers. So that's the last story, last use case I wanted to highlight. This is, again, one of my customers in Sacramento. It's a government agency. So what they are trying to do here is that they have two data centers. So they have one small data center, second small data center. Both of them are connected through dark fiber, not very far apart, 6 miles apart maybe. And they wanted to implement NSX so that they can get the benefit of disaster recovery with SRM. So we said, why don't we start your journey from one side, right? And we will help you build this NSX infrastructure in your small data center. And then when you are ready, because see, this is what my take is, that if you are starting this journey, if you are resource constrained, if you don't have the right skill set, just start small. Start maybe with distributed firewall, logical routing, and when you are comfortable, when you have your processes around it, you can easily move into other direction. So this is exactly what he's going to do. He's going to be taking this project on, and since he has this site A up and running now what he can do, he can extend this router, distributed router, DLR, and extend it across site, right? So these logical switches that you see here, this line is representing a logical switch. You can actually spread this logical switch across multiple sites without buying the expensive technologies. There are technologies out there, like OTV, for example. Those are proprietary technologies that can extend the layer 2 segment for you. You will get it all in software without deploying those expensive hardware, right? So that's what he's planning to do with this project. So these are the examples I wanted to show you or highlight in my presentation. These are real customers. These are real customers. These are successful customers that we are helping. Within our BU, we have a rapid deployment program where we go out and help our customers, because I'm part of the business unit. I'm part of the product management team. We go out and we help these customers deploy NSX successfully in their data centers. So our mantra is no DC left behind. So that's what we believe, and this is the reason we are here. So we are moving towards the end of our presentation. I was going a little bit fast because I wanted to spare some time for the Q&A. So, but yeah, this is what we believe. So the data center, the NSX is for any size, any vertical, any use case. And it has been deployed successfully for a number of our customers, and you can definitely use this and then deploy it in your small data centers as well. So with that, any questions you guys have, you can come to the speaker and ask any question if you have.